It was supposed to be forgettable, one of those ordinary evenings that blur together when you look back on a year. The kind you only remember because something later forces you to rewind your life and ask, when did this start? Rain had been falling since late afternoon, soft at first, then heavier, tapping against the windows of the old house like impatient fingers. The power flickered twice before settling into a low, uneasy hum. The air smelled faintly of dust and damp wood, the kind of smell that seeps into your clothes and stays there. We were alone. That was the first thing that felt off. The house was usually loud, doors opening, voices overlapping, the TV murmuring in the background. That night, it felt hollow. Too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Ethan sat on the floor near the couch, sorting through old camping gear he'd pulled out of the storage closet. Flashlights, a folded tent we never used, 2 sleeping bags, one blue and one dark green. Looks like we're stuck here till morning, he said lightly, but his voice echoed more than it should have. I nodded, pretending not to notice the way my chest tightened. We'd known each other for years. Long enough that silence between us wasn't awkward, usually. Long enough that I could recognize the smallest shifts in his mood. The way his jaw tightened when he was nervous. The way he avoided eye contact when something was on his mind. He hadn't looked at me properly all evening. I told myself it was nothing. That I was imagining things. I'd gotten good at that, burying thoughts before they could form into questions I wasn't ready to answer. Still, my eyes kept drifting back to him. To the way the lamplight caught in his hair. To the slow, deliberate way he moved, like he was stalling for time. To the space between us that felt heavier than the storm outside. Don't, I warned myself. The house creaked as the wind picked up, a long groan running through the walls. Somewhere upstairs, something shifted, maybe a door, maybe just the building settling, but it made my skin prickle. Did you hear that? I asked. Ethan looked up. Our eyes met for half a second too long. Yeah, he said, probably nothing, but he didn't sound convinced. When the power finally went out for good, the darkness felt intimate in a way I wasn't prepared for. The lamp died. The room shrank. All that existed was the sound of rain, the faint glow of a flashlight, and the two of us standing too close. There's only one sleeping bag that's still clean, he said after a pause, holding up the green one. I laughed, a little too quickly. We'll manage. I don't know which of us suggested it first. Maybe neither of us did. Maybe it was just understood. As we spread the sleeping bag on the floor, my thoughts raced ahead of me, filling the silence with questions I didn't want answers to. What if this changes something? What if it already has? When we finally lay down, separated by only a thin layer of fabric and years of unspoken tension, I stared into the darkness, listening to his breathing slow beside me. I told myself it was just a night. But as the storm raged on and his arm shifted, just slightly, toward mine, I realized I might have been lying to myself for a very long time. And once that line was crossed, could it ever be uncrossed? The storm had exhausted itself sometime before dawn, leaving the air thick and metallic, like the world had been scrubbed raw. I woke to the sound of dripping water, steady, patient, somewhere beyond the walls. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then I felt warmth, not the vague, distant warmth of a blanket, but something living. Breathing. Ethan. My body went rigid before my mind caught up. We were still in the sleeping bag, tangled in a way that felt accidental but also inevitable. His arm rested across my chest, heavy and familiar, like it had always belonged there. Our legs were pressed together, bare skin against bare skin where the fabric had twisted during the night. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, afraid to move. This is fine, I told myself. This doesn't mean anything. But my body disagreed. Every small movement of his breath sent a ripple through me. I could feel the rise and fall of his chest against my shoulder, the warmth of his neck so close that I caught the faint scent of soap and something unmistakably him. Careful. Don't wake him. The house creaked again, louder this time. A sharp pop from somewhere overhead. Ethan stirred, his grip tightening briefly before loosening. His face shifted closer to mine, his breath brushing my jaw. My thoughts scattered. He opened his eyes. For a second, neither of us spoke. The silence was too thick to break without shattering something. Oh, he said quietly. Oh, I echoed, just as useless. He didn't move his arm right away. I noticed that before anything else. Noticed how his gaze dropped, not to my eyes, but to the place where our bodies met beneath the sleeping bag. Then, finally, he pulled back. Sorry, he said, sitting up too fast. I must have rolled over. Yeah, I said. Happens. The lie settled between us like dust. We spent the morning pretending everything was normal. Ethan made coffee using the camping stove, the hiss of gas filling the kitchen with artificial confidence. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching steam rise from the mug like a signal I didn't know how to read. Outside, the world looked brighter than it had any right to be, sunlight glinting off wet pavement, birds already arguing in the trees. Normal. This is normal. But the house felt different. Charged. Like it remembered something we were trying to forget. Power should be back by noon, Ethan said, checking his phone. Network's still spotty. I nodded, staring at the floor. I might head out later. Yeah. He replied too quickly. Sure. Something flickered across his face then. Regret, maybe. Or relief. It vanished before I could name it. We didn't talk about the night. Instead, we talked about everything else. The roof leak that needed fixing. A neighbor's dog that wouldn't stop barking. A movie we'd both seen but never discussed. Our words skimmed the surface of something deeper, careful not to break through. By early afternoon, the power returned with a jolt. Lights flickered on. The refrigerator hummed back to life. The house exhaled. I should have left then. Instead, I followed Ethan upstairs when he said he needed help checking for water damage. The staircase groaned under our weight, each step louder than necessary. My chest tightened with every floorboard creak, every accidental brush of his elbow against mine. The hallway smelled faintly of damp carpet and old paint. Door at the end, he said, pointing. The guest room. The door was ajar. That was new. I thought this was closed, I said. Ethan frowned. I did too. He pushed it open. The window was cracked, rainwater pooled on the sill, dripping onto the floor in slow, deliberate drops. The curtain fluttered slightly, even though the air was still. Drip, drip, drip. My skin prickled. That's weird, Ethan muttered. I don't remember opening it. Neither do I. For a moment, neither of us moved. The sound of water felt louder than it should have, echoing in the small room like a countdown. Then Ethan crossed the space and shut the window. The room fell silent. Too silent. He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. You okay? He asked. I nodded, even though my pulse was racing. Yeah. Just tired. Another lie. We stood there, facing each other, the space between us shrinking without either of us stepping forward. Sunlight filtered through the window, catching dust motes in the air, turning the moment almost unreal. You've been quiet, he said. So have you. He huffed a soft laugh. Fair. The words I'd been holding back pressed against my ribs, begging for release. Last night meant something. Or maybe, last night scared me. Or the most dangerous truth of all, I don't want to forget it. Instead, I said nothing. Ethan looked at me like he was waiting for something. Like he was bracing himself. When it didn't come, his shoulders slumped. I'm going to grab some towels, he said. For the floor. I'll help. We reached the linen closet at the same time. Our hands brushed as we grabbed for the same towel. Electric. That was the only word for it. He froze. So did I. Slowly, he looked up at me. This time, he didn't look away. Did you feel that? He asked quietly. My throat tightened. Yeah. Another creak echoed through the house, sharp and sudden. We both flinched, the moment cracking under the weight of reality. Old house, he said, forcing a smile. Always making noise. But his hand didn't move away. Neither did mine. Time stretched, thin and fragile. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips, could feel the heat of him, the question hanging between us like a wire pulled too tight. If I pulled away now, maybe things would go back to how they were. If I didn't, Ethan, I started, my voice barely audible. He inhaled sharply. Yeah. The house groaned again, louder than before, followed by a dull thud from somewhere below. We both jumped. What was that? I asked. His eyes darted toward the stairs. I don't know. For a moment, something like fear crossed his face, not of the sound, but of what we were circling. "We should check it out," he said, stepping back at last. Relief and disappointment hit me at the same time. We descended the stairs cautiously, every sense alert. The living room looked unchanged, but the back door was slightly open, letting in a draft that carried the scent of wet earth. "That wasn't open before," I said. Ethan swallowed. "No, it wasn't." The calm routine we'd clung to all day cracked wide open. As he reached for the door, I wondered, not for the first time, whether the real danger that day had anything to do with the house at all. Or whether the thing we should have been afraid of was standing right beside me. The back door creaked as Ethan pushed it open, the hinges protesting like they were warning us to stop. Cold air rushed in, sharp with the smell of wet soil and leaves. The yard looked untouched, mud darkened by rain, the fence leaning the same familiar way, the trees dripping their last memories of the storm. Nothing moved, and yet, my skin crawled. "Hello," Ethan called out, his voice steady but tight. No answer. The door behind us swung slightly, tapping the frame with a hollow knock. I flinched, my nerves stretched thin. "This is stupid," I muttered. "Probably just the wind." "Probably," he echoed, but he didn't sound convinced. We stepped outside anyway. The ground squelched under our shoes, each step too loud in the quiet afternoon. Clouds still lingered low and heavy, muting the light, making everything feel suspended, like the world hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. Ethan walked ahead of me, shoulders tense. I watched the way his hands curled into fists, then relaxed, then curled again. He's scared, I realized. Not of the house, not of the noise, of what was happening between us. We circled the yard, found nothing. No footprints that didn't belong to us. No broken branches, no sign that anyone, or anything, had been there. "Nothing," he said finally, exhaling. "Guess the door just blew open." "Guess so." We stood there, the excuse hanging thinly between us. When we went back inside, Ethan locked the door with more force than necessary. The click of the lock sounded final, like a decision. We didn't move right away. The living room felt smaller than it had earlier, the air warmer, heavier. Sunlight slanted through the windows, catching on the edges of furniture, outlining dust and shadows. Everything looked the same, but I knew better. "About earlier," Ethan began, then stopped. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Yeah," I said, barely breathing. He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "I don't want things to get weird." "Too late," I thought. "Me neither," I replied, even as something twisted painfully in my chest. Silence stretched. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second a reminder that we were running out of space to avoid the truth. He cut himself off, jaw tightening. "Last night caught me off guard." My mouth went dry. "Same." That got his attention. His gaze snapped back to mine, searching. "You didn't expect it either." I laughed softly, without humor. "I've been trying not to think about it." "And how's that working?" I hesitated. This was the edge. One step forward or one step back, and nothing would ever be the same. "Not great," I admitted. Something shifted in his expression, relief, maybe. Or fear giving way to something more dangerous. He took a step closer. "I keep replaying it," he said quietly. "Waking up and realizing you were there. That it felt normal." My pulse roared in my ears. "That's what scares me," I whispered. It didn't feel wrong. The word hung between us, charged. Ethan swallowed. "I should have moved away." "Why didn't you?" His breath hitched. "Because I didn't want to." There it was. The room seemed to tilt, my balance suddenly uncertain. Every rational thought I'd clung to cracked under the weight of his honesty. "We can't," I said automatically, the protest weak even to my own ears. "This could mess things up. Us. Everything." "I know," he replied. "I've been telling myself the same thing." He was close enough now that I could see the fine lines of tension around his eyes, the way his chest rose and fell a little too fast. "And yet," I asked. "And yet," he said, voice barely above a breath, "here we are." The clock kept ticking. I thought about all the nights we'd spent together on opposite sides of a room. All the jokes that lingered a second too long. All the looks I'd pretended not to notice. Maybe this was always coming. My hands shook at my sides. Ethan, if we cross this line. I know, he said softly. There's no going back. Another creak echoed through the house, loud enough to make us both jump. The sound broke the spell for half a second, reality rushing back in. He laughed under his breath, shaky. This place really knows how to ruin a moment. Or force one, I thought. I should have stepped away. Should have put distance between us, found safety in routine and denial. Instead, I stayed. He lifted his hand slowly, deliberately, giving me time to stop him. His fingers hovered near my wrist, not touching. Tell me to stop, he said. I looked at his hand. Then at his face. The words caught in my throat. He took my silence as an answer. His fingers brushed my skin, just barely, and electricity shot up my arm. The contact was innocent enough, but it felt like a confession. Like an admission of everything we'd been avoiding. My breath came shallow. This is a bad idea. Probably, he agreed. His thumb traced a small, absent-minded circle against my wrist. I felt it everywhere. The world narrowed to that point of contact, to the space between our bodies that kept shrinking without either of us moving. I don't know what this means, I said, my voice unsteady. I don't know what it makes me. Ethan's expression softened. You don't have to know right now. Slowly, he leaned in. Not all the way, just enough that I could feel the warmth of him, could see the hesitation in his eyes. If you pull away, he said, I'll let you. I swear. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I thought about tomorrow, about explanations, about consequences. Then I thought about the way I'd felt waking up beside him. Safe, seen, terrified and alive all at once. I didn't pull away, he exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. His forehead rested briefly against mine, not quite a kiss, not quite restraint. For a moment, we stayed like that, balanced on the edge of something irreversible. Then the house made a sound again. A sharp crack from upstairs, like a branch snapping. We froze. Ethan pulled back, eyes wide. That didn't sound like the house. Fear surged, cold and grounding. The spell shattered. Someone's here, I said. He nodded, already turning toward the stairs. Stay behind me. As we stood there, adrenaline replacing longing, I realized how close we'd come, how easily the world could have narrowed to just us. And as we moved toward the unknown sound, my thoughts raced with a different kind of fear. Because even if nothing was waiting for us upstairs, something had already changed, and I didn't know whether we'd just stepped back from the edge. Or if we'd only delayed the fall. Each step felt deliberate, exaggerated by the silence. The banister was cool beneath my fingers, slightly damp where the storm's chill still clung to the wood. Ethan stayed half a step in front of me, his shoulders tense, jaw set, but every few seconds, he glanced back, as if checking that I was still there. I noticed things I normally wouldn't. The way his breathing changed when we reached the top of the stairs. The way his hand shook before he stilled it. The way my own pulse refused to slow, even when nothing jumped out at us. The hallway looked exactly as we'd left it. Doors closed, carpet dry, no shadows moving where they shouldn't be. That noise came from this end, Ethan whispered, nodding toward his room. My stomach tightened. Of all the places in the house, that one felt the most loaded. Too many late-night conversations. Too many moments spent sitting on opposite sides of the bed, pretending we weren't aware of how close we already were. He pushed the door open. Nothing. The window was closed. The room smelled faintly of detergent and something warmer underneath, familiar, comforting, dangerous. The bed was neatly made, the blankets smoothed like no one had touched them all day. Ethan exhaled. Guess we're imagining things now. Maybe, I said, though my eyes lingered on the floor, on the space beside the bed where we'd stood so many times before. He turned to me then, really looked at me, and whatever adrenaline had been holding him upright seemed to drain away. This is messed up, he said quietly. I nodded. Yeah, not about the noise. We both knew that. The silence pressed in again, heavier than before. The house had stopped creaking, like it was done interfering, like it had handed the moment back to us. I don't think I can just pretend today didn't happen, he said. My throat tightened. Me neither. The admission felt heavier now, stripped of adrenaline and fear. Raw. He leaned against the dresser, rubbing his face with both hands. When he dropped them, his eyes were glassy, not with tears, but with restraint. I keep thinking about what this says about me, he admitted. About us. And what does it say? I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than any answer could have. I don't know yet, he said. But I know I don't hate it. Something in my chest cracked open at that. I looked away, staring at the wall, the faint crack in the paint that ran like a fault line from ceiling to floor. That scares me, I said honestly. Because I feel the same. When I looked back at him, the space between us felt electric again, but different. Quieter, more dangerous in its calm. He stepped closer, stopping just short of touching me. I could feel the heat of him, the gravity pulling us together. This doesn't have to mean anything right now, he said, almost pleading. We don't have to name it. I searched his face for certainty and found none, only one tangled with fear. And if we don't? I asked. Then maybe it grows, he replied. Or maybe it disappears. Neither option felt safe. My hand lifted before I consciously decided to move it. I stopped halfway, fingers hovering in the space between us. He watched, breath shallow, not moving. The room felt impossibly still. I thought about crossing that final inch. About how easy it would be. About how impossible it might be to undo. Instead, I let my hand fall. Something like relief flashed across his face, followed immediately by disappointment. It mirrored exactly what I felt. Maybe we should slow down, I said. He nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah, maybe. We stood there a moment longer, suspended in the aftermath of something that hadn't fully happened, but almost had. When we finally stepped apart, the room felt colder. Downstairs, the house resumed its normal sounds, the refrigerator cycling, pipes ticking, life going on as if nothing had shifted. But everything had. As I grabbed my jacket and moved toward the door, I felt his eyes on me, heavy with unasked questions. At the threshold, I paused. This isn't over, is it? I asked quietly. Ethan didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, but only just. I don't think it's that simple anymore. I stepped outside into the clean, damp air, the door closing softly behind me. And as I walked away, heart still racing, I couldn't tell what unsettled me more. The fact that nothing had happened. Or the certainty that something eventually would. On the surface, everything slipped back into place. Messages were exchanged. Jokes were made. Life resumed its familiar rhythm. From the outside, nothing looked different. But underneath, everything felt wrong. Ethan didn't text the way he used to. Shorter replies. Longer gaps. When we did see each other, our conversations stayed carefully shallow, like we were afraid of what might surface if we went any deeper. I caught myself watching him when he wasn't looking. The way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. The way he hesitated before speaking, like he was constantly editing himself. The way his shoulders stiffened whenever our hands came too close. And every time, guilt clawed at me. You should have stopped this before it started. You should have said something clearer. You should have wanted less. At night, sleep refused to come. I replayed that moment over and over, the almost touch, the words we didn't say, the way the air between us had felt heavier than any confession. What haunted me most wasn't what happened. It was what almost did. One evening, a week later, he asked me to come by. Just like that. No explanation. The house looked the same when I arrived, quiet, orderly, innocent. Too innocent. He stood in the doorway when I knocked, hands in his pockets, eyes searching my face like he was bracing for impact. Hey, he said. Hey. The word carried too much weight. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between us deliberate, strained. The TV played softly, neither of us watching. Every second stretched, thick with things unsaid. I've been thinking, he finally said. My heart skipped. Yeah, about that night, about us. I swallowed hard, nodding. Me too. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. I don't know how to go back to how it was. The admission hit harder than I expected. I don't think we can, I said quietly. He looked up then, eyes meeting mine. There was something raw there, fear, longing, confusion, all tangled together. That scares me, he said. It scares me too. Silence fell again, deeper than before. He opened his mouth like he was about to say something else, something important. Something final. Then his phone buzzed. The sound was sharp, intrusive, slicing through the moment. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting in a way I couldn't read. He stood abruptly. Sorry, I need a minute. He walked away, leaving me alone on the couch, heart pounding, mind racing. I stared at the hallway he disappeared down, every instinct screaming that whatever he was about to say mattered. That it might change everything. The house creaked softly around me, the same sound that had haunted us days before. I waited. Seconds passed. Then minutes. He didn't come back. When I finally stood to leave, confusion and dread twisted together in my chest. At the door, I paused, hand hovering over the handle, wondering if walking out now meant choosing distance, or protecting myself from something inevitable. Behind me, somewhere deeper in the house, a floorboard creaked. I turned, breath caught in my throat. Ethan, I called softly. No answer. As I stepped outside into the fading light, one thought refused to leave me. Some lines, once seen, can't be unseen. And whatever we were standing on the edge of, we hadn't stepped away from it. Not really. The only question left was whether the next time we stood that close, we'd finally fall. The kind that arrived quietly, wrapped in routine, slipping past without leaving a mark. If you'd asked me earlier that day what I expected from the evening, I would have said nothing. Dinner, small talk, sleep, repeat. That's what made it dangerous. The sky had been heavy since morning, clouds hanging low and swollen, as if they were waiting for permission to break. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the air felt charged, warm, damp, restless. The house stood exactly as it always had, lights glowing softly through the windows, familiar and unthreatening. Safe. I remember pausing in the car longer than usual, fingers resting on the steering wheel, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. You're overthinking, I told myself. I always did that around Ethan. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and clean laundry. Everything was in its place. Shoes by the door, keys on the hook, the quiet hum of electricity in the walls. It was comforting in a way that made my chest ache. Ethan was in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. He looked up when he heard me, smiling in that easy way that had always undone me a little. You're late, he said. Traffic, I replied, shrugging off my jacket. Normal, easy, familiar. We'd fallen into this rhythm without noticing, shared evenings, borrowed clothes, conversations that drifted long past midnight. Nothing about it felt strange. That was the problem. Outside, thunder rolled low and distant, like a warning that hadn't decided whether to announce itself yet. Rain followed soon after, tapping gently against the windows. The sound wrapped around the house, sealing us inside. I told myself I liked storms because they slowed things down. Because they gave you an excuse to stay. As the evening wore on, the house grew quieter. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where every small sound feels deliberate. The refrigerator clicking on, a pipe knocking somewhere in the walls, the soft creak of wood shifting under changing pressure. At one point, I realized we were the only ones there. That shouldn't have surprised me. And yet, something about it made my stomach tighten. Didn't your brother say he'd stop by? I asked casually. Ethan hesitated, just for a second. Yeah, guess he changed his mind. The answer was simple. The pause wasn't. I noticed it then, the way Ethan kept glancing at his phone without checking it, the way his laughter came a beat too late. The way the space between us felt, charged, like the air before lightning strikes. I tried to ignore it. Tried not to think about how close we sat on the couch. About how aware I was of his presence, of his warmth, of the way his knee brushed mine and stayed there a moment too long. Don't read into it, I warned myself. The storm intensified, rain pounding harder now, wind rattling the windows. Somewhere upstairs, something shifted with a dull thump. We both froze. What was that? I asked. Ethan looked toward the ceiling, his expression unreadable. Probably nothing. But the house seemed to disagree, settling with a long, uneasy creak. As the lights flickered once, twice, I felt a strange certainty settle in my chest. Whatever this night was going to take from us, it had already begun.